God's timing is always perfect. It may not align with our schedule, our desires, or the way we imagine things unfolding, but it is never late. You see, we live in a world that is constantly rushing. We want things instantly, success, breakthroughs, answers. We pray and expect immediate results. But God operates on a different schedule. He sees the full picture from beginning to end, and He knows exactly when to open the right gate. Think about a farmer who plants seeds. He doesn't plant today and expect a full harvest tomorrow. There is a process, a season of watering, waiting, and trusting that in time those seeds will grow. The same principle applies to our lives. When we pray for an open door, God doesn't just give us what we ask for, He prepares us for what's ahead. And often, preparation takes time. Many people grow frustrated because they don't see movement. They think God has forgotten them. But what they don't realize is that while they are waiting, God is working. He is arranging the right people, setting up divine appointments, and preparing circumstances that will align perfectly at the right moment. If you receive a blessing too soon, before you are ready, that blessing can become a burden. God knows this, which is why He sometimes delays things, not to deny you, but to develop you. There is a powerful example in the Bible of a man named Joseph. God gave him a vision that he would one day be in a position of great influence. But instead of immediately stepping into that destiny, Joseph faced years of trials, betrayed by his brothers, thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, and even wrongfully imprisoned. From the outside, it looked like God's promise was nowhere to be found. But behind the scenes, everything was unfolding according to God's perfect timing. Every setback was a setup, every delay was a necessary step toward his destiny, and when the time was right, Joseph was elevated from the prison to the palace in a single day. The same is true for you. What seems like a delay is not a denial. What seems like silence is not neglect. Just because you don't see progress doesn't mean God isn't working. Sometimes He keeps the door closed because what's on the other side isn't ready for you yet, or maybe you're not ready for it. Or maybe you're not ready for it. If you rush into a business deal too soon, you could make costly mistakes. If you enter a relationship before the right time, you might miss out on God's best. If you step into a position of influence before your character is developed, the weight of responsibility could overwhelm you. God's plan is not just about giving you what you want, but making sure you're prepared to handle it when it comes. That's why patience is so important. In moments of waiting, our faith is tested. Will we trust God when nothing seems to be happening? Will we remain faithful even when we don't see results? Will we keep believing even when doors remain shut? The enemy wants you to believe that God has forgotten about you. He whispers, look at everyone else. They're moving forward, but you're stuck. But remember this, God is never in a hurry, and He is never late. When He opens the right gate, things will fall into place so effortlessly that you will look back and realize why you had to wait. Every delay had a purpose. Every setback was a setup for something greater. So don't grow weary. Don't lose heart. Keep praying, keep believing, and keep trusting. When the time is right, God will open the right gate, and nothing will be able to stop what He has planned for you. His timing is always perfect. Closed doors are a blessing in disguise. At first, they may feel like disappointments, setbacks, or even failures, but in reality, they are divine protections. Every time a door closes, it is God redirecting you towards something better, something you may not yet see or understand. Think about a time in your life when you desperately wanted something to work out. Maybe it was a job opportunity that seemed perfect, a relationship you thought was meant to be, or a dream that felt so close, yet it slipped through your fingers. In that moment, it felt like rejection. It hurt. You questioned why it didn't happen, why things didn't go your way. But later, when you looked back, you realized that if that door had opened, it would have led you down the wrong path. Sometimes what we want is not what we need. We have a limited perspective, but God sees the full picture. He knows the future, the things we cannot foresee. That job that rejected you, maybe it would have drained your joy. That relationship that ended, maybe it would have pulled you away from your purpose. That business deal that fell through, maybe it would have brought more stress than success. What looks like a loss is often God's way of saying, I have something better for you. One of the greatest examples of this is in the story of Moses leading the Israelites out of Egypt. They were finally free from slavery, moving toward the promised land. But then, suddenly, they hit a closed door, the Red Sea. It seemed like the end. Behind them, Pharaoh's army was closing in, and ahead of them was an impossible barrier. Many of them panicked. They thought God had abandoned them. But what they didn't realize was that this closed door was actually a setup for one of the greatest miracles in history. In a moment, God parted the sea, making a way where there was none. If that door hadn't seemed closed, they would have never witnessed the power of God moving in their lives. The same principle applies to you. You may feel stuck as if nothing is working out, but trust that God has a plan. Every delay, every disappointment, every no is leading you to the right yes. We often pray, God, open the right doors, but what we sometimes forget is that for the right doors to open, the wrong ones must first close. It's in these moments that faith is tested, not when everything is going our way, but when we have to trust that God knows what He's doing, even when we don't understand. It's easy to get discouraged when things don't work out. You start questioning yourself. Maybe you weren't good enough. Maybe you made a mistake. But rejection is not always a reflection of your ability. It's often God's way of protecting you from something that isn't meant for you. Instead of seeing closed doors as disappointments, start seeing them as God's way of guiding you. You may be praying for a door to open, but God may be saying, not yet. I'm still preparing you. I'm still setting things in motion. Or He may be saying, that's not the door I have for you. If you walk through that one, you'll miss the one I've actually prepared. Sometimes we settle for less because we don't have the patience to wait for God's best. We think this is good enough, but God is saying, no, I have something greater. When a door closes, don't waste time knocking on it, trying to force your way in. What God has closed, let it stay closed. Instead, lift your head, trust His plan, and keep moving forward. One day you will look back and thank Him for every no, for every missed opportunity, and for every closed door, because each one was a blessing in disguise, leading you to exactly where you were meant to be. Faith unlocks the right gate. It is not your effort, not your connections, and not even your talent that opens the doors God has for you. It is faith. Faith is the key that turns locked doors into open pathways. When you trust God even when you don't see a way, when you keep believing despite the obstacles, you activate His power in your life. Many times we try to force things to happen. We knock on doors that won't open, push against walls that won't move, and get frustrated when things don't go according to our plans. But faith doesn't operate in frustration. Faith operates in trust. It is the ability to say, God, I don't see how this will work out, but I believe You have a plan. I don't know when, I don't know how, but I trust that You will open the right gate at the right time. In the Bible, there's a story about Peter walking on water. He stepped out of the boat, doing the impossible, walking toward Jesus. But the moment he took his eyes off Jesus and focused on the wind and the waves, he began to sink. That's what happens when we let doubt take over. Fear, worry, and overthinking begin to pull us down. The circumstances around us make us believe that what we're hoping for is impossible. But when we keep our eyes on God, when we walk in faith instead of fear, we will see the miraculous happen. Faith is not just believing when things are easy. Faith is believing when everything says it won't work. It's trusting God when you're waiting for a breakthrough, but nothing seems to change. It's declaring victory even when all you see are obstacles. That's the kind of faith that moves mountains, that shifts circumstances, and that opens gates that no man can shut. There will always be voices telling you that it's impossible. The enemy will whisper, you're wasting your time, it's never going to happen, just give up. But you have to silence those lies with faith. Speak life over your situation. Instead of saying it's never going to work out, declare God is working behind the scenes. Instead of saying I'll never get through this, Say, God is making a way where there is no way. Your words shape your reality. When you speak in faith, you align yourself with God's promises. Faith is not passive, it's active. It requires obedience. When God tells you to step out, you have to move even when it doesn't make sense. When He tells you to keep going, you can't quit just because things get tough. Too often, people give up right before their breakthrough. They stop believing because they don't see immediate results, but faith is persistent. It says, I will trust God no matter how long it takes. Look at the story of Joshua and the walls of Jericho. God told the Israelites to march around the city for 7 days, and on the seventh day to shout. From a logical standpoint, that made no sense. How could marching and shouting bring down massive walls? But they obeyed. They kept walking in faith even when nothing seemed to be happening. And on the seventh day, at the right moment, the walls came crashing down. That's how faith works. Sometimes you'll have to keep marching when nothing seems to change. You'll have to keep believing when you don't see progress. But at the right time and the right season, the walls will fall, the door will open, and the right gate will be unlocked. Faith is the bridge between where you are and where God wants to take you. You may not see the full picture, but God does. And if you trust Him, if you keep walking in faith, you will step into the blessings, the opportunities, and the breakthroughs that He has prepared for you. The right gate is already set to open. You just need faith to walk through it. Patience is the test before the breakthrough. It is in the waiting season that faith is refined, character is built, and endurance is strengthened. Many people want the blessing, the opportunity, and the answered prayer, but they don't want the process that comes before it. They don't want to wait. They don't want to endure the delays, and they don't want to trust God's timing. But here's the truth. Before every breakthrough, there is always a test of patience. Waiting is not easy. When you know that God has given you a promise, when you feel in your heart that something greater is ahead, it can be frustrating to feel stuck. You pray, you believe, and yet nothing seems to change. You watch other people move forward while you feel like you're standing still. It's in those moments that doubt tries to creep in. You start to wonder, did I hear God correctly? Did I miss something? Why is this taking so long? But what if the delay is not a denial? What if the waiting is necessary to prepare you for what's ahead? If you receive something before you are ready, it won't be a blessing, it will be a burden. God knows exactly what He is doing, and He will never give you something that you are not prepared to handle. Just because you don't see movement doesn't mean that nothing is happening. Behind the scenes, God is aligning the right people, the right opportunities, and the right circumstances to come together at the right time. Think about David. He was anointed as king when he was just a shepherd boy, but he didn't step into his throne immediately. He had to go through years of challenges, running from Saul, hiding in caves, and facing battles that tested his faith. If God had placed him on the throne the moment he was anointed, he wouldn't have been ready. He had to go through the process of preparation before he could step into his destiny. The same applies to you. Every season of waiting is a season of preparation. God is strengthening you, stretching you, and teaching you to rely on Him. The longer the wait, the greater the reward. But the question is, will you trust Him in the process? Will you remain faithful even when you don't see immediate results? The enemy wants you to get frustrated in the waiting season. He wants you to give up, to stop believing, to start doubting. He knows that if you lose patience, you might walk away from the very thing that God has planned for you. But when you choose to trust instead of complain, when you choose to wait with expectation instead of frustration, you position yourself for the breakthrough that is coming. Waiting is not wasted time. While you wait, God is working on your behalf. He is closing the wrong doors so that you don't step into something that will harm you. He is developing your character so that when the breakthrough comes, you will be ready to handle it. Every great man and woman of faith had to go through a waiting season before stepping into their calling. Joseph had to wait in prison before he became second in command of Egypt. Abraham had to wait for years before the promise of a son was fulfilled. Even Jesus spent 30 years in preparation before stepping into His public ministry. If you are in a season of waiting right now, don't be discouraged. Keep doing what God has called you to do. Keep praying, keep believing, and keep walking in faith. Your patience is being tested because your breakthrough is on the way. And when the right moment comes, when God opens the gate, nothing will be able to stop what He has prepared for you. The waiting may be hard, but the reward will be worth it. Stay faithful because the breakthrough is closer than you think. Your purpose is bigger than your problems. Life will always bring challenges, obstacles, and unexpected struggles, but none of them can cancel what God has placed inside of you. Too often, people allow their problems to define them. They focus so much on what's going wrong that they lose sight of the bigger picture, God's purpose for their life. But the truth is, no setback, no hardship, and no opposition can stop what God has ordained for you. When you go through difficulties, it's easy to feel overwhelmed. You may wonder why things are happening the way they are, why you keep facing roadblocks, or why it feels like every step forward comes with resistance. But understand this, the size of your challenge is often a sign of the size of your calling. The enemy doesn't attack people who aren't a threat. If you're facing obstacles, it's because your purpose is too great for the enemy to ignore. He knows that if you step fully into what God has planned for you, you will impact lives, break generational chains, and walk in divine favor. Look at the story of Moses. He was called to deliver the Israelites from slavery, but before he could fulfill his mission, he faced major struggles. He was almost killed as a baby, forced to flee Egypt as a fugitive, and doubted his own ability to lead. But none of those problems stopped God's plan. His purpose was bigger than his fears, bigger than his mistakes, and bigger than the opposition he faced. And when the time was right, God used him in ways that changed history. You might feel like your problems are too much to handle, but they are not bigger than the God who created you. Instead of focusing on what's wrong, shift your perspective. See every obstacle as a stepping stone. Every difficulty is an opportunity for growth. Every challenge is a chance to build your faith. The struggles you are facing today are preparing you for the doors that will open tomorrow. If you quit now, you'll never see the full picture of what God is doing. Sometimes we think that because we have a calling, life should be easy. But purpose comes with pressure. Diamonds are formed under pressure. Gold is refined by fire. And strong warriors are shaped through battles. The hardships you face are not meant to break you. They are meant to strengthen you. When you push through difficulties with faith, you develop resilience, wisdom, and a deeper connection with God. And when you finally step into your purpose, you will look back and realize that every problem you faced was necessary for your growth. Joseph understood this. He was sold into slavery by his own brothers, falsely accused and thrown into prison for years. If anyone had a reason to give up, it was him. But instead of letting his problems define him, he stayed faithful. He kept believing. And in one moment, God took him from the prison to the palace. What the enemy meant for harm, God used for good. That's how God works. He can take the very thing that was meant to destroy you and turn it into the very thing that elevates you. Your struggles are not random. They are not meaningless. They are part of the process of stepping into your divine purpose. You were created for more than just survival. You were created to make an impact, to fulfill a purpose, and to walk in God's perfect plan. But to get there, you must refuse to let problems stop you. Keep pressing forward, keep trusting, keep believing, no matter how big the struggle, your purpose is bigger. And when you align yourself with God's will, no problem will be able to stand in the way of what He has prepared for you. When God opens the right gate, no one can shut it. It doesn't matter what obstacles stand in the way, what people say, or how impossible the situation may seem. When God decides that it is your time, nothing and no one can stop it. Too often we get caught up worrying about who is against us, what challenges we are facing, or how long it is taking for our breakthrough to come. But the truth is, when God moves, everything must align. You may have faced rejection, but when God opens the right gate, the same people who overlooked you will have no choice but to acknowledge what He's doing in your life. You may have struggled for years, but when the time is right, one shift in God's timing can change everything overnight. That's why you must remain faithful even when you don't see results, because in a single moment, God can take you from waiting to winning, from overlooked to overqualified, from last to first. Think about David. He was just a shepherd boy, taking care of sheep in the fields, forgotten by his own family. When the prophet Samuel came to anoint the next king, David's father didn't even invite him to the lineup. He was overlooked, dismissed, and ignored. But that didn't matter, because when God chooses you, no one can disqualify you. The moment David was anointed, his destiny was sealed. He didn't have to fight for approval. He didn't have to beg for recognition. What God had prepared for him was his, and no one could take it away. The same applies to you. It doesn't matter who has counted you out. It doesn't matter how many closed doors you have faced. When God says it is your time, no man can interfere. His plans cannot be stopped. His purpose cannot be blocked. And His will cannot be overturned. That's why you must stay in faith even when it looks like nothing is happening. Sometimes we get frustrated because doors aren't opening fast enough. We see others moving forward and wonder why we are still waiting. But what you must understand is that when God opens a door, it won't require struggle, manipulation, or compromise. It will be effortless. You won't have to force your way in, beg for an opportunity, or convince people to see your value. The favor of God will go ahead of you and make a way where there was no way. Look at the story of Esther. She was just an orphan girl, unknown and unqualified in the eyes of the world. But when God's favor was upon her, she was elevated to become a queen. No amount of opposition, jealousy, or scheming could stop what God had ordained for her life. The same is true for you. You may not have all the qualifications, you may not have the connections, but when God is on your side, you have everything you need. This is why you must not allow fear or doubt to take root in your heart. The enemy wants you to believe that you will never reach your destiny. He wants you to think that your past disqualifies you, that you have made too many mistakes, or that it's too late for you. But God's plan for your life is not dependent on human opinions. His favor is not limited by your past, your background, or your shortcuts. He is the God who opens doors that no man can shut. That means when it is your time to step into what He has prepared for you, nothing can block it. No setback, no failure, no delay can cancel what He has spoken over your life. The right opportunity, the right people, and the right circumstances will come together in a way that only He can orchestrate. All you have to do is stay ready, stay faithful, and stay in position. So don't waste time worrying about who is against you. Don't stress over doors that have closed. Don't get discouraged because things haven't happened yet. When God moves, it will happen suddenly. It will happen in a way that no one saw coming. And when He opens the right gate, nothing and no one will be able to shut it. Stay faithful because your moment is coming.